Welcome to this new automotive news video for Saturday, May 30, 2026. And today, we're going to talk about Peugeot, who lied about the range of their electric cars, from Stellantis, who, after years of delay, will finally adopt electric vehicle technology that everyone else has already been using for years, from Toyota, still hesitating on electric cars, and from Seat, announcing the long-awaited arrival of new hybrid cars. These are the topics of this video for Saturday, May 30th, 2026. I hope you'll find them interesting. If that's the case, I'm counting on you to show your support by, of course, leaving a like, subscribing for the next videos, boosting this one if the option appears for you, and of course, by leaving a comment where you share your opinion on today's news. We'll start by talking about Peugeot, which has a problem with its electric cars. Indeed, for years, electric car owners have always heard the same thing. If the real range is lower than the announced numbers, it's normal. The conditions aren't ideal. Either it's too cold, or you've used the heater, or you're driving too fast at 130, for example, on the highway. In short, drivers have ended up believing that the gap between the promise and reality is just part of the game. The courts, however, have decided to send a very different message. In Germany, in fact, a court has just ruled in favor of an owner of an electric Peugeot 2008 who felt that his vehicle was simply unable to deliver the performance that had been promised to him. And what makes this case particularly interesting is that the problem wasn't just about the highway. You should know something about electric cars. Their range behaves the opposite way from an internal combustion vehicle. A combustion engine vehicle on the highway or on a road at 90 km/h with cruise control maintains a steady speed and is able to go much farther than what is claimed by the manufacturers, with much lower fuel consumption, but as soon as you drive in the city, the consumption skyrockets and it's very hard to reach the advertised range. With electric cars, it's the opposite. In the city, you use very little energy and can sometimes surpass the manufacturer's range. But on the highway at 130 km/h, the range is often reduced by half. It's common knowledge that electric cars use more energy at high speeds, so no one is surprised when their highway range is less than official figures. But what's quite interesting in this case and with this car model is that the owner claimed that his car couldn't even reach the range announced by Peugeot, including in favorable conditions like driving in the city, in eco mode, for example. In this specific case, the gap had become so big between the real range and the range announced by the WLTP protocol that the owner of the vehicle actually decided to go to court after being refused a refund by the dealership. And what's particularly interesting here is that an independent assessment was carried out, during which the experts reproduced the WLTP measurement conditions, during which they found a large enough gap between the real range and the announced range to convince the court that the problem was not simply a normal difference between theory and reality. Thanks to this assessment, the judge ruled in favor of the customer and ordered a refund for the vehicle. So, first of all, this sets a precedent, which means that later, in Germany, if other electric vehicle owners feel that the real range they get with the car is too low compared to the announced range, they will be able to take the manufacturer to court more easily and also obtain compensation more easily with a partial or full refund of the vehicle. Also, this isn't the first time Peugeot has been found liable for this. So yes, it's just bad luck, it happens. A few months ago, again involving Peugeot, and this time it happened in France, in Toulouse, the Court of Appeal made a similar decision in a case involving a Peugeot e-partner. The difference here is that the problem wasn't just about the actual range of the vehicle, but also about how that range was presented at the time of sale. In this case, too, after expert assessment, a significant gap between the actual and theoretical range was found. But above all, what the judges considered was that a professional car dealer at a dealership absolutely had to provide transparent and complete information about the actual performance of the vehicle being offered to the customer. In other words, what was being judged here was not just the vehicle, but also the way these figures were systematically highlighted by the manufacturers and the dealerships. These decisions are ultimately quite important for the entire automotive industry. It probably means that if brands want to avoid lawsuits over the range of their cars, they will have to make vehicles that meet the ranges announced in the WLTP protocols. On the other hand, we know that the WLTP protocol will also be modified with the Euro 7 standard to provide more accurate results. In the meantime, a question arises. How many drivers today are driving an electric car whose performance is very far from what they thought they were buying? The good news is that Stellantis and Peugeot will finally receive a major technical update for their electric cars, since it has just been confirmed. And it's still good news even though Stellantis has fallen far behind. Stellantis will finally switch to an 800-volt electric architecture. I say finally because most Chinese and also German manufacturers have already switched to 800 volts for a while now, because it allows for much shorter charging times for electric cars, So basically, much faster charging. Whereas among Stellantis' Italian and French brands, we had stuck with 400 volts until now, with cars that will keep coming out in 2026 and early 2027, which are already technologically lagging behind compared to what's being done elsewhere. The good news is that starting from mid-2027, that's going to change thanks to the new STLA-1 platform, the scalable multi-energy platform, which will finally switch to 800 volts. That's not the only good news, since this platform will also adopt what's called a cell-to-body architecture, which means that in this configuration, the battery is no longer just installed in the vehicle, it actually becomes a structural element of the car. This makes it possible to have a lighter electric car, lower in height, but also with a more rigid chassis. The cars that will be based on the STLA-1 platform will have two built-in technologies by default. The STLA Brain, which is simply, let's say, the new digital brain of future models from Peugeot, Citroën, or Jeep, for example. Stellantis wants to replace dozens of separate controllers and computers with a single large one to manage everything in the vehicle. But also the STLA Smart Cockpit, which is simply, let's say, the visible face of the car. It's the one that will manage the screens, the apps, the navigation, let's say the whole user interface experience. And finally, several vehicles based on the STLA-1 platform will, for the first time, feature this in a mass-produced vehicle sold by Stellantis. Steer-by-wire eliminates the mechanical link between the steering wheel and wheels, and where all the controls go through electronic systems capable of interpreting and transmitting the driver's actions. So the STLA-1 is an opportunity for Stellantis to get up to date, at least up to 2026 standards by 2027, hoping for their sake that by 2027, the 800-volt architecture won't already be outdated, because then things would really look particularly bad for them. While Stellantis is investing heavily in its next generation of electric cars with 800 volts, not all manufacturers seem convinced that this technology is the answer to everything. And Toyota has just sent a very strong news signal by announcing that the Toyota Group has canceled the development of several electric models that were actually close to reaching the commercialization stage. Toyota, like most other major Japanese brands such as Honda or Mazda, believes that for now it's more interesting to focus on hybrids rather than fully electric vehicles. That's why they just stopped the development of their electric sedan, the LFZC. It's a model that was supposed to be released both under Toyota and Lexus. On paper, technologically speaking, it had every chance of being quite successful since this car was based on a brand new platform, dedicated to electric vehicles that included several gigacasting elements. It's a manufacturing method that was really popularized by Tesla, which allows for reducing the number of parts, and therefore production costs, and ultimately also the prices for the customer. At the time, Toyota was telling us about a car capable of exceeding 800 kilometers of range, going from 10 to 80% charge in just 20 minutes. And above all, it was supposed to be the first Toyota car to use the new ARN operating system, which is presented as the future software brain of the manufacturer. Toyota and Lexus designed this car to make up most of the ground they had deliberately lost to the rest of the auto industry. Its launch was supposed to be scheduled for the end of 2026. Then, little by little, Toyota started to slow down the project. The launch was pushed back to mid-2027, then to the end of 2027. And now the project has simply been abandoned. For now, Toyota prefers to refocus on hybrids. They will still continue to develop the technologies that were supposed to be equipped on this car, so they'll be ready in case. Later on, Toyota wants to make new electric cars again. Toyota canceled this car and doesn't want to rush into fully electric vehicles for now, for the simple reason that in its main markets, the demand for electric cars is still not high enough. In Europe, it's growing, but not enough. And in the United States, which is still Toyota's biggest market, well, the electric car market is actually declining. And in all these other major markets like Latin America, the Middle East, or even Japan, these are all regions where there's no demand for electric cars. So Toyota is simply focusing on what sells for now, which is hybrids. And by the way, that's also what Seat is doing. Seat, which had been sidelined by the Volkswagen Group for a few years because Volkswagen preferred to focus on Cupra, to the point where people thought Seat was simply going to disappear. Well, no, that's not going to happen. Seat is far from doomed. And its CEO, Markus Opt, has just confirmed the arrival of mild hybrid powertrains. So basically, 48-volt mild hybrid technology will be offered on several new models, especially the Ibiza and the Arona starting in 2027. Seat also confirms that for now, it still doesn't want to move towards fully electric cars, for the simple reason that at the moment, Seat is a brand that aims to be somewhat low-cost, entry-level, and for now, it's impossible to make affordable, versatile, small electric cars. That's why it's now focusing more on 48-volt hybrid technology for its two models, but also on a full hybrid, basically a Toyota-style hybrid with a larger electric component for its future Leon, which should arrive in 2028. So we might see, and maybe it's not a bad thing, the gap between Seat and Cupra widen in the coming years, with Cupra focusing on high-end electric vehicles and Seat concentrating on entry-level combustion models. We've covered all the topics for today. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, as always, I count on you to show it by leaving a like, subscribing, and maybe even supporting the channel by clicking the join button below this video. I'll see you tomorrow for the last video of the week. Ciao!